welcome to Tub Talks with Damon. My very special guest today is New York human, Clif Wallace. The one, the only Clif Wallace. It is so good to see you.
Great to see you too. Thanks for having me here today.
Thank you so much for coming to my tub. You were kind of with me at the beginning of formulating this idea of like, could I actually do interviews in a bathtub in Brooklyn? And I think you were very supportive and
Yes,
encouraging.
very supportive.
So I'm so glad you're here because part of why I wanted to do this show was to just talk about people in New York who I know, sometimes it's people other people know, who are living in this world and getting through this world and sometimes dealing with a lot of crap in this world, but trying to find ways to survive and make it through. So I want to ask you about some of that. But before I do, I want to ask you, Clif, what do you like most about your body?
I think the thing I love most about my body is my skin.
Yeah.
Inherited from my mom. It's super smooth and slick, and I always get compliments on it.
Uh-huh.
It's super protected from the sun because of the melanin.
Cool. Yeah, it is. So you get compliments from when you go out in the sun? Or?
Oh yeah, always. People give people a hug, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, your skin is so smooth." And I'm like, "Yes, thank you."
Yeah. How do you feel when people say that?
I feel warm, and plus touch is my love language, so I always feel really good in those senses.
Okay. Just gonna make sure you speak up too. So people can savor every word you have to say. So touch being the love language.
Yeah, touch is definitely one of my primary love languages.
Yes, me too. We need it. And we've been going through a period of history where even before the pandemic, that people were not getting a stable amount of consistent touch in their lives. But I think especially during these last 3 years, there's been a problem. But of course, then that's how I ended up meeting you, was through a friend during the pandemic.
Yep.
So that was a win.
Yeah, very much.
Yes. So Clif, one of the things that we talk about is just uncertainty, doubt, ambivalence. There's so much going on in the world. And in this tub, I'd like to just hear about what is happening in people's lives and how they're navigating things that are fucked up right now. Can we talk about those things?
Yeah.
Can we talk about a few of those things?
Just a few.
Okay, just a few. So you'll tell me if I push too much. But so what's going on in life? What's uncertain for you right now?
So right now, I think the biggest uncertainty that I'm navigating, that I haven't had much experience navigating before, is being laid off. I was working for an education tech company as a community manager for the last 5 years. And we got acquired, and then my position wasn't needed any longer. And so now I'm kind of in a really interesting space where I'm like, what's next for me? How do I figure out where I want to be employed? What company do I want to work for? What is that culture going to be like? What skills do I want to really put up at the forefront? What skills do I want to develop in the next 5 years? And then also things that I didn't really expect to have to navigate, like being unemployed and needing to get unemployment benefits and trying to figure out how to do that. Figuring out how to get PrEP when you don't have health insurance, and navigating this world of trying to get health care when you aren't employed. And so I am definitely finding that it is much more difficult than I had ever anticipated it would be.
How long have you been without a stable job now?
So I got laid off in May, so it's really only been about a month and a half-ish.
But I know that time can feel really long.
Yes, exactly. It's surprising for me to hear myself say how short of a time span it's been when it really feels like I've been unemployed for several months at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me the position you had again.
So I was holding two positions. One was Seller Community Programs Manager.
Which is what?
So at the company that I was working at, there was an online marketplace And sellers were a really core audience in that marketplace, and they needed someone to advocate for their needs, build programs for them, look out for them, and make sure that the community space was a really healthy, thriving community for them. So that was one role I occupied at my company, and the other one was as a diversity, equity, and inclusion lead. And that's really about like looking at community diversity, equity, inclusion data, making decisions around that, and seeing how we can make the spaces more inclusive and equitable for large audiences.
And these were educational spaces?
Yes, so the sellers that are on the site of the company that I worked for were educators. These are teachers who, many of whom are like teaching in classrooms, but are also curriculum developers and content creators and business owners. And so being a part of this website and this experience has allowed them to be able to get access to funds that they probably wouldn't have had access to just being teachers in classrooms.
Wow, okay. So this had been your regular job for 5 years?
Yeah, for 5 years.
Including during the pandemic?
Yeah.
So it was, the company was acquired,
Yes.
and then they eliminated your position. What did that feel like?
I think because I also have like a social work psych background, I learned about like what happens when acquisitions happen, and like how like there may be downsizing that occurs, and so I was somewhat anticipating that my role could potentially be eliminated, especially since it's more like additional support programs that we would be adding. And if the company like really needed to make pivots or shifts or things, it might not be seen as a core or primary function for the business. So I think intellectually, it felt like I was like, this makes sense, like I get it. But emotionally, like I'd been there for 5 years, like I'm in a community space, and so I like a really core focus of my job and my role is building relationships. And so being in a position like where my role is eliminated and it being so highly relational and not having an opportunity to really say goodbye or to navigate that transition with those educators from my own voice was more jarring than I had anticipated it would be.
So you didn't get a chance to say goodbye or have closure with the people you were working with?
I got to say goodbye and have closure with the people that I was working with, but not with the seller community at large that I had been like advocating for and representing.
Wow. So emotionally then, that hurts.
Yeah, there's some pain that I think like comes out of that, as it happens with many types of relationships that just experience a change.
Right. I know one of the last jobs that I had was with the HIV vaccine trials, and that ended. And I sort of knew that they were likely going to let me go. But there's nothing that prepared me for that moment when you're actually sitting in that office being told we're not keeping you on. Sort of like, dating someone and you know the relationship is over, but once they break up with you, you're like, what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
It's a kick.
Yeah.
It hurts. Yeah. It's a kick in the butt. Not in a good way. So before this job, had you had gaps before, times that you were looking for work before?
Once. So prior to getting in this role, I was an educator for 7 years. I was a special education teacher and administrator in the Bronx and then in Brooklyn. And so I spent a lot of my time in education working with students and families, very intimately so. And what was different about that transition from this transition is that was more my choice. I did have pretty much like a whole entire year to kind of like help my students like understand that that transition was going to happen, let the families know that that was going to be taking place, because I was planning to transition into my organizational psych masters.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was a long-term job, but when it ended, you were basically the one who walked away from that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you went pretty closely into the last job.
Yeah.
Okay. So for most of the last 12 years, you've had that kind of work available to you.
Right.
Okay. So there's really a difficult transition of not having that.
Yeah.
How are you taking care of yourself during this transition?
I think I am working really hard to kind of give myself more grace than I would.
What does that look like?
I think that looks like there are days where I like, there are moments and days where I feel really good and I'm in the up and up and I'm like, oh, like this feels good. I feel like there's some progress. I'm like applying to jobs and seeing really cool opportunities, like, and just like feeling really good about looking at what I've accomplished over the last few years, looking at how I'm showcasing that. And then there are moments where I'm like, oh, like I feel burnt out because I have LinkedIn notifications that come through on my phone and I'm constantly looking at them and I'm realizing, oh, like right now I'm hanging out with my boyfriend and we're watching Netflix and now might not be the time to like sit here and like sift through job opportunities and save different ones that I know I might want to apply to like the next day or after the weekend. So I'm finding that even though I am in this like transition, it can be really easy to go overboard. It can be really easy for me to go overboard and just like be super inundated by filling out applications and finding new roles and seeing rejection and not getting towards the interview phase. Like I can get really sucked into just that and then not allow myself to really like part ways from it and say like that is just one part of an experience that I'm going through. Like there are several other parts of my life that I can still nurture along the way. So I think it's taking, there's a balance, there's like a pull and tug that I'm still trying to find the balance of, but when I find myself like spiraling, I like step back and I'm like, just give yourself some grace. Like, you're okay, you'll be fine, you'll find something new. Go work out. I like love playing volleyball, so I'm trying to invest more time into doing that. Trying to invest a little more time into putting my phone down when I'm spending time with friends and stuff so that I don't have to see the notifications and then step into it. And then just like leaning on my community and support and just talking about like what's happening in the world for other people so that I don't feel so centrist, like so much like I think it's like centrality, like having all the centrality around myself and my own experience when there are other people who are going through all kinds of different experiences right now.
Centrality meaning when you are in that space, you can
Yeah.
very tunnel vision.
Just like, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Have you ever been in this kind of position before in your life? Wait, you're 35.
Yeah,
Okay.
35.
Have you ever been through this kind of experience before?
I have once between stepping out of the education space and getting the position that I was in for the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
There was a 6-month period of time where I wasn't working and I was constantly like looking for jobs, and if I were to reflect back, like I did not navigate my stress very well at all during that period of time.
What would navigating stress well look like?
So I think navigating the stress well and in a way that would feel healthy for me would be more like what I'm doing right now, where I'm like talking about the experience, I'm networking, I'm like connecting with different folks in the space, like friends that I know of, and like just seeing what's going on. Going out and like being active rather than just like staying in house. Like eating better and like taking care of like my body and my physical wellness. Those were things that when I reflect back on that 6-month time period, I didn't do super well. And if I reflect now, I'm like, oh, I've learned some stuff along the way. Like I've gained new tools to manage stress and anxiety, and I'm utilizing them. I'm utilizing my support networks. I'm utilizing my support systems.
Mm-hmm. Are bathtubs helping?
The bathtubs are helping.
Okay, good. So you learn self-care, and it sounds like right now you're really kind of forced to learn self-care. Mm-hmm. Volleyball, diet, nutrition, talking about your feelings. And it sounds like in your mind there really has to be sort of a back and forth between part of you that's worried right now and the other part of you that's trying to soothe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one way that I could characterize it is that I can find myself like staying in fantasy, focusing and zeroing in on the future, focusing and zeroing on the past, rather than just being here in the present with myself and looking at the facts of like what's actually going on versus like what am I telling myself is happening right now in this moment.
I think this is so important for people to hear, because I'm not sure people always know or perhaps remember how destabilizing it can be to lose a job. To lose that stability. It's not just about, I mean, it is definitely about the money, right? But it's also about all these other things, the relationships, the activation of your mind in a focused way, getting a sense to feel productive. These are such important things.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think as I reflect on this experience, I'm thinking about what was it about being employed that feels like it's missing outside of the financial stability and like health stuff that I can bring into my current unemployed life in this moment. And one of those things is structure. And so one thing that I'm finding is really helpful for me as I'm thinking forward and staying in the present is planning. In my role, like there wasn't a day where I wasn't like planning things out like a month and ahead, maybe 6 months ahead, like a year ahead. And in this moment, like I think I fooled myself into believing that I can't still plan and that I can't still play like a super active role rather than a reactive role in what's happening. And so I'm finding myself leaning into planning and having a more active role in my weeks, in my coming months, in my coming days, so that I'm not being just reactive to the day or finding that I'm like sitting during the day, not really knowing what my options are and then falling prey to just whatever emotional state I might be in at the time.
Mm-hmm. So there's a balance between falling into an emotional state, respecting your emotions, but also planning and keeping yourself on track.
Yeah.
That is I think between that and looking for work, that's a full-time job and a half right there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, very much so.
Oh, wow. Okay. What would you like to be doing in this process? Or not in the process, but what would you like this job search to be for you? What would you like to do next for work?
I think I know for certain I want to lean more into my organizational psych degree. Because eventually...
Can you let people know what that is?
Yeah, so as I see it, a social organizational psych, or the way I want to lean into my social organizational psych degree is that I want to continue to be in a space where I'm looking to understand communities, I'm looking to understand organizations, I'm looking at the dynamics that are at play, and I'm working to either develop interventions that help support and facilitate it in being a much more healthy environment, or diagnosing what's working and then sharing and replicating that. I think in the educational system as an administrator, I could see that play out very frequently in our entire school system, where we're looking at our students who have very different needs, and we're seeing what works for them and what's successful. And then we are able to then replicate that school-wide as like a skill system or a process. And it really, we find that it like benefits everyone as a whole. Like one example that I think people may not be really aware of is like voice to text. Like that wasn't something that was necessarily like mass produced for everyone, but look at how beneficial it is for everyone with a busy schedule to just be able to say, oh, this is what I want to speak to my friend, send, done. Instead of like having to type it out. And that was originally an intervention for people who had different needs.
Interesting. So just something like that on a wider, when someone said, hey, we could implement this on a wider scale. So that's the kind of vision that you can offer to these organizations. Would you prefer it be an educational or academic system, or are there other areas?
I think because I'm very passionate about education, I would love to have it be in the education space, but I'm not totally married to it. Especially when applying this org psych perspective with a diversity, equity, inclusion lens. Like there are a myriad of places who could really benefit from thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion as not just one entity, but like as distinct disciplines and principles. And being able to understand, what data and metrics are you looking at to see if you are actually having a healthy, measurable, positive impact in an organization, in a community, even with your employees. And that would also be a space that I would love to be able to lend my expertise in.
Yeah, because I think those are important, and those are very, inclusion and equity can be very different things in a structure.
Very much so.
Right? Like, what do you see as the difference, or potentially the difference that plays out when they see those as the same thing?
I think, so inclusion is very much a sentiment. It is a feeling. And so if you're looking at a community or you're looking at people, like that would be the way in which you would try to understand whether or not you are having that measurable positive impact. Equity is around access. And so you could not conflate the two, though there are ways that they could support one another. But if you conflate them, then you risk saying that you are measuring or looking to understand something that you actually are not getting the right results or feedback from.
Yeah. So have you seen that problem play out in the academic space, where those, where there's systems that say inclusion is the same thing as access?
I think I see more that I sometimes see organizations say that something is a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative, and they're not clear about which they're influencing, and because they're not clear about which they're influencing, they may or may not actually be influencing anything. Or they may be influencing one, but have stamped it with all three. and it's not having an impact on access, or it's not having an impact on the sentiment around inclusion, or they're just stuck in diversity and they have not been very specific about what they mean when they talk about diversity. And so everyone's kind of operating from their own definition and believe that it has been achieved or that they're making progress, and they potentially might not be in the way that they are hoping they are.
Right. So as someone who can recognize those problems in a system, you have the ability to help them achieve their goals if, and I think it's an if, they actually do want all people, all races, all ages to have access to services.
Yeah.
You know, this reminds me a lot of what people are talking about these days. Sort of surrounding this is the conversation around affirmative action, which also takes on a lot of these debates about what is equitable, what is accessible. What is your take on our rolling back on affirmative action in this country?
I have a lot of feelings about it. I think it is still so new that right now, and I am, much of what I feel about it is just like disappointment and anger and sadness, and I just continue to feel that people's like human rights are just kind of being rolled back over and over and over again. And it really pushes me to want to act even more and to like push even more into this space from a social work perspective, which is focusing on the system. Like, how do we understand what is going on in this system and achieve meaningful impact?
Yeah. I think some of the debates about affirmative action have been saying that inclusion, now I could be wrong, so to like, I've been trying to understand what the arguments are against it, or at least try to understand the kernel of logic. And I think it's not understanding that inclusion is not access.
Yes.
Right? That diversity does not mean equity.
Yep, exactly.
It doesn't mean everyone has equal opportunities to access higher education or to thrive academically just because you're marking off stats on a chart, like check marks on an enrollment list.
Yep.
How do you get people to understand that?
That is a really complicated question, because
How do you
when I
get
think
Harvard?
about, I feel like when I think about trying to answer something like that, it brings me back to segments. Like, who are we talking about? Who are we trying to influence? And then we can start to get into like the how. But even that becomes really complex, because like, who are the true deciders here? Who are the true people pulling the strings? Like, this network of needing to like, the network that we would need to influence in this space is complex and dynamic. And it's not as simple to discern who are all the who's and the what's in this space. I think there are definitely the people we see delivering the messages and all that stuff, but there are also, I suspect, like invisible actors in the space that, or less visible actors in the space that would need to be influenced, and whose minds would need to be changed in some way, shape, or form, and understanding what they value, what they know, and like educating them, and also just like what are they being influenced by, makes this kind of work challenging.
Yeah. It sounds like a challenge, though, that you would want to take on some facet of whatever kind of work you're doing.
Yeah.
And we're in this for the long haul. This issue, these questions, I think these discernments are not going to go away in our lifetime. And so if you're passionate about this and angry about this, I'm glad you are, that I think there's going to be really a lot of opportunities to continue to work in that space. Because I don't think most people who are on the powers that be in academic institutions get what you're saying. I don't think they get that, we're in this post-racial, equal society. We're not.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of space. I think, your ideas, your energy, your passion, there's a lot of space for that. And I think your ability to see things in terms of systems, in terms of education. And you also mentioned your social work background.
Social work psych background.
Social work's
Organization.
Oh, okay.
So it's all in
All in that. But, you have so much to offer. And again, the ability to see how these things all kind of fit together. I'd hire you if I had anything, other than just sitting in a bathtub talking about it. But no, it's really incredible. And I think your voice needs to be heard. So in this process of searching for work in 2023, even though it feels like longer, it's been going on a couple of months, but what do you feel like you're being treated, at least with some kind of respect or integrity in this process? Do you feel like people are welcoming? Are they being dismissive? Are they ghosting? What's this process like right now?
That's a good question. I'm really early on in this still. So I can definitely say in my recent experience, I have been reaching out to different people and at companies and spaces, some of which I have connections with, some of which I do not. I am finding that people have been responsive, which is great. I will also add that when I'm looking to see who I can speak with in companies, I have my own bias going on in the back of my mind, where I'm is this person likely to want to speak to me? And are there some sort of commonalities that we may have in our either historical experience or our work experience or in our lived experience? And I am finding that is something that has been guiding me towards reaching out and trying to connect with certain people rather than others. I will say one thing for me, just being a Black man, is that I am beginning to look into more senior level roles. And when I go into these companies and I look to see I'm all right, well, what are their most senior level members look like? And I look and I'm oh, there's in many cases no people that have the same racial background as I do, or seemingly. And so then I'm all right, well, let me go to the director level, and I may see one, I may see two, and then I go to the next level if it's available in a company, and I'm not seeing as many Black people represented in these higher level positions in organizations. And at times that is disheartening. And also if I let it, it can lead to me choosing to not give the organization a chance, or not give the company a chance, or to not even like try to reach out to make some sort of connection, or ask about someone who's been in a similar role who maybe doesn't look like me. So I'm like, will they even give me a chance to like have a conversation? One, they're super busy, I'm sure. And that's like definitely one factor, but not seeing many people that look like me in those positions is also like a little jarring as well.
So if you weren't aware, that could really bias you towards saying there's no, like,
Yep.
there's no place for me here.
Right. Yeah.
And
so,
that's the opposite of equity, right?
Right.
Like what we were saying.
Right.
Like that, when you look around and you see there's no one in higher up that reflects you, that's not equity at all.
yeah.
Even if they have diversity initiatives, there's no one reflected in the system
Mm-hmm.
that is a person of color or black that reflects your experience.
Mm-hmm. So that's noise that when I'm on these job searches, I need to quiet.
How do you do that?
It's very challenging. Sometimes I just need to discharge it. Like sometimes, like I know last week I called my mom and I was like, hey, is it okay if I just like vent about what I'm feeling and experiencing in this job search so that I can discharge it and then be able to step back into that space and demonstrate and show like, here's what my experience is, and put that in my resume and put that in the cover letter and let them make the decisions and the choices. Yeah. Because I would hate for myself to be my own barrier to entry into these positions.
Well, and it's both, right? Because
Yeah.
in my thought, it's not you that's the barrier, it's the lack of, again, like you said, it's not seeing yourself reflected anywhere, not seeing that there's any tangible opportunity for you. So it's...
Yeah, I think it is a little bit both, but I think if I allow that to influence me to not apply
Mhm.
because of what I see, then that doesn't add to the diverse candidates that they could consider. And so in that, it could end up being even more cyclical, because then I am, what's the word? I forgot. In psychology, we call it self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah,
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, that's a lot. So that's a lot for you or for one person. Like, as a white guy, I go into a place, whatever job, whatever crappy, shitty job I've ever had, what has been consistent is like I walk into an interview and there's people who look like me. There's white guys, usually white gay guys, or, I see myself reflected in the person interviewing me or the people I see on the way to the interview.
Mm-hmm.
That's been a commonality. So those are not questions I've had to grapple with in the middle of dealing with the destabilization of being unemployed, or, sort of the thoughts about that and the emotional parts of that. That I don't have to deal with the burden of those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's grossly unfair.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're aware that that's not going to stop you.
Yeah.
That is not going to get in the way
Yeah.
of
very
you
much so.
going for the positions, the jobs that you want to have, that you are qualified to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I get that's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes some time,
Wow.
but
Okay.
there are ways to kind of like deal with. I mean, I have learned ways to deal with it, so that
Such as
things what I just said.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing that you mentioned, I'm just gonna switch a little bit.
Mhm.
Okay. Is that in this process? Are you comfortable?
Yeah, are you?
Yeah.
I'm just like,
Okay. Stretch it. We talked also about the health coverage and PrEP.
Mhm.
And if it's okay with you, I'd like to ask you more about that, because I don't think people really understand how this all works. Maybe I don't really understand how all this works. So you had a job, you had healthcare coverage, you had the ability to get PrEP and the labs and the doctor all through the health coverage. Then that all went to shit.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
And then I found myself needing to navigate the healthcare system. And so.
And you're New Jersey based.
Yeah, so recently New Jersey based as of January. And so like figuring out like where to go, who to talk to, what website do I need to go to, what is the language that's being used, like just questions that I hadn't really thought to consider or understand, like the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. Had not even thought to like question whether those were not one and the same thing, and they are not.
Right.
And so it has been really challenging and frustrating to figure out, you know, who has discounts available for what, and when you do apply, like, and you get rejected, like, then where do you go? And then you have to apply someplace else. And I just
So
like
you're
really
saying like
wish.
applying to different companies, different.
No, so like, how do and as you can hear, like it is still not very clear to me how this all works. I kind of ended up taking what I thought was like the easier road out, which was just to like purchase private health care.
Instead of going through ACA.
Yeah, instead of like trying to figure out and navigate the ACA process. When I originally started searching, I was hoping that there would be like just one website that would have like very clear like step-by-step instructions on like if this and this, and maybe that does exist, but it wasn't super intuitive to me, and I could not find it. And so I like started the application, filled it out, got the rejection. I think was told to go to New Jersey like family care website, and apply for that to see if I would get rejected there, and then if rejected there, then I could come back and get some of the like affordable health care plans. I did pay for an affordable health care plan.
So for them to determine eligibility, you had to be denied from
two sources, it seems like.
Wow. And in the meantime, what's going on with your PrEP while you're doing all this
Well,
stuff?
in the meantime, the PrEP that I had in reserve was dwindling. And so that added like a brand new challenge and complexity, because then I was like, well, I don't want to not be on PrEP. So how then do I like figure out how to get this? And I remember the service that I was getting my PrEP medication through, or the provider that I was getting my medication through, had additional refills that were available. So I went to my capsule account and tried to get the refills, and learned that in order for me to get that without the health insurance, I'd have to pay like thousands and thousands of dollars. And I was like,
Driving to Skokie?
yeah.
Okay.
And I was like, I can't do that for just 1 month. Like, it is way too much money, and I'm already living off of savings. So, thankfully, I mean, now that I have private health insurance, I can like get a doctor now and get that prescription and get my Descovy back. But for people who don't have the ability to pay for private healthcare, even for a short period of time, like, I can only imagine what their options would be.
Right. So the thing, again, because I think about these things also in terms of systems. The thing I recommended that we talked about was going to Gilead, asking them for their uninsured assistance. So you said, yes, that worked, but that didn't cover that didn't cover all the other stuff.
Right.
That doesn't cover the doctor visit, the labs, the blood work. That is required, so they can pay for the prescription but not the wraparound services.
Right.
That's been the challenge in New Jersey. Okay.
Yeah. At least for me, who is not familiar with the system at all and is learning it.
And most people aren't.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of work in it, so there's certain things, but certain things I feel like I know, and then a lot of shit I don't know. But most people don't have the background to navigate these complicated systems and deal with the runaround and go here, fail there, do this, do that.
Yeah, call these numbers, wait on the line, like, it's a lot.
And it's still not really resolved right now.
No, it's not resolved right now. It will be, and I think I will say that it is not fully resolved, somewhat by my design also. Like, there are things that I can do.
What could you do?
Like, for one, now that I have my health insurance, I do need to get a primary care doctor.
Okay.
So that's a definite next step for me. And thankfully, like, they can pay for like urgent care visits, so I can go and get support through urgent care, just like a labs and testing and stuff like that is now more accessible and available.
Okay.
And I don't have to pay out of pocket as much.
As a New Jersey resident, can you access some of the services here in New York that help, like Cal and Lord or Community Healthcare Network?
That's a good question. I haven't actually looked into that, but I would.
Okay, I'm gonna find out.
I would suspect yes.
Work in progress. We're gonna figure this shit out.
Yeah.
Okay. But still, that doesn't. The point is, even when we get your individual situation, it doesn't change the systems that often lead people to feel discouraged, dehumanized, and just fucking give up.
Right.
Right? And then we wonder why people are not using PrEP on a regular basis because, you know.
There are these challenges, yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So but you've been enduring through this. You've been, sounds to me like putting up with a lot of this. Sorry, I gotta move again.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay, okay. Seems like you've been willing to do some of this really arduous, shitty work.
I think some days when I feel like I have the energy wherewithal, yes.
And aren't people in this process of going there, signing up for this, are people at least being respectful?
I think in some cases, yes. I think like in other cases it just feels like, I mean, it's just a job, and it like, I think I remember there's one customer service rep that I was like talking to, who, like, it was very clear to me that they were an expert in all of this, and it seemed as if they thought that I would be one also. So they seemed a little short with like many of the questions that I had around like, okay, so what's the timing for this? You know, let me make sure I understand like what the process is and what my next steps are. Like they seem to have a little bit of short patience for having to reiterate, but like that is also a part of like some customer service or customer experience.
Right. Which makes sense, but still not satisfying.
Yeah.
But yeah, it makes sense because a lot of these folks are on the phone all day and are getting yelled at all day, and sometimes that takes a toll.
Yeah.
You're still a human being.
Yeah, but otherwise, people have been pretty, like, attentive.
Yeah. So Cliff, how is this interview? How are you feeling? Feet in the tub.
I'm feeling good.
Okay.
I know I was a little anxious before.
Yeah.
Last week, but I'm feeling good.
Okay. What were you anxious about?
I think I was anxious about the unknown.
Mhm.
I'm like much more used to like prepared questions
Mhm.
and like super scripting and all of that stuff.
So again, uncertainty. That's the theme of the day.
Yeah, really.
The theme of the day. So that kind of brings me to some of my last questions, which is that at age 35, what's it like to be a gay man, a gay black man living in New York City at age 35? What do you enjoy about that, or what's difficult about that? What excites you, or what if anything is not good about this?
I think at this point in my life, I'm like not a new implant in New York City. Been here for the greater part of like 10 plus years, so at least a decade. And I like have my community. And I love my community. Like I love them so much. I appreciate them so much. And I love that being a gay black man here in New York City, I have that community to lean on. So that's definitely one thing that I like absolutely love about being here in New York City. I think also, let's see what else. I love that there are just so many opportunities. There are lots of things that you can get involved in. I know for me, like volleyball has kind of taken that on for me, and I appreciate that because of the mecca that exists here in New York City. I'm also then able to like go and connect with other gay volleyball lovers like across the entire US and internationally.
Does that provide friendship and connection?
Yeah.
That's great. So that's something I get asked all the time by gay men is, how do I make friends? And I often say, like, find what you love, do what you love, and create connection around that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So volleyball has been that.
It has absolutely been the conduit that I needed to be able to feel like I could connect with gay men in New York City outside of just sexual exchanges. And like be able to create meaningful connections and relationships in our case.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
So those are some of the good things about being 35, living in New York City, building community.
Yeah.
Is there anything about being in your 30s or getting older that you don't feel excited about, or that feels maybe a little less clear to you?
So I'm not the person to ask that kind of a question to, because my like growing up, I remember my mom just being like, she just really wanted to age and like specifically wanted to have gray hair. So I've been like influenced by that a lot growing up. I've like constantly heard that aging is beautiful and like gaining more wisdom and experience in the world is beautiful, and specifically having that be around, like having gray hair, at least for my mom, has been something that she's always wanted.
Wow.
So growing up, I like clung to that. I didn't have this, I didn't have like a bias towards aging or like not wanting to be older. In fact, I feel like for the last like 8 years, I like joke with my friends that I'm like a 67-year-old man spiritually in this whatever age body I am. And like quite honestly, when I like hear like friends, acquaintances, younger generations like talking about like, oh my gosh, I'm like getting older, I just want to be this again, like this age again. And I'm like, well, you kind of have only two choices. Like, you can either live or die, so choose wisely.
Beautiful.
And so I love this aging process that I'm going through. And I get that, like, I'm still in my 30s, so there's like a long way to go. But I am also like really invigorated by seeing older gay men who are seemingly very healthy and like active. They're like in their 70s, they're like doing stuff, traveling the world. And I see that and I'm like, I want to be able to like take care of myself so that I can be healthy in my 70s, 80s, 125, and like be able to like still travel the world and have my faculties and do all of these things.
Wow. That is beautiful to hear. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And I share a lot of that. I mean, I grew up around elders that were vibrant and smart and fun. In the gay community, I've always had friends that were much, much older, who often had a lot more energy, were getting a lot more sex than I ever was. And those really shaped my experiences of aging to see that, you know, there's so much opportunity here. And also working in psychology for me.
Yep.
The older I got, the more I was taken seriously. The more experience, but also the more gray hair, the more my voice seems to resonate in terms of the stuff I'm saying. And I think, you know, again, that's some of the age and the wisdom and the experience is that, for better or for worse, sometimes we're taken more seriously when we stand up and speak out for the things that, you know, that we're for equity or for the things that matter to us. But I'm really glad to hear that, you know, there's used to be, and I know still is, sort of this explicit ageism in the community, like, oh, when I turn 40, my life ends. And I remember hearing people say that, like when I was in my 20s, and I'm like you said, it's like, well, what's the alternative? You know, we're all trying not to die of AIDS around here.
Right.
Is that the way you want to go? Which would be a slap in the face to so many people who did die of AIDS and didn't get the privilege of turning 40.
Right.
But there was that something about turning 40 that used to be this fear that I remember people being afraid of, that like you get put out to pasture. And I'm like, if that's the case, it's going to be a really fun pasture. There's a lot of really fun people in that pasture. I can't wait to be in that pasture. Because that's like, so I'm glad to hear that for you informs how you look forward to getting older and taking on the purpose and the work and the principles that matter to you and the play and the community that fulfill you. So is there anything else that you would like to share with the world, or share about your hopes, your goals, or what you're dealing with today?
I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, all right. Well, Clif, I want to thank you so much. You're a friend of mine, and knowing you is such a pleasure. Meeting you, especially during such a rough time in this world, in the middle of the pandemic, was really a gift. And I really value you joining me in the tub. It's sort of been back and forth and thought about it, and I really appreciate you taking time to share with me what's on your mind and what's in your heart. Would you agree that if and when it feels right, that we will come back and continue to talk about these ideas? Because I think the job situation is very temporary, but I think the other things you're talking about are very much a part of our world. The lack of equity, what people really need to be understanding in complex systems if they are claiming to promote equity. Your insights, your wisdom, I would love to keep hearing about that and how people are getting it wrong a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Would you do that again?
I would absolutely love to.
Okay, and whatever else is on your mind and in your heart.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, folks. If people want to follow you or see more about your work, or how would you like people to do that?
Oh, if they want to connect with me, they can absolutely reach out to me through LinkedIn. Just look up Clif Wallace, and they can find me there.
Great. So the link will be right below. If you have any thoughts or insights or even opportunities to suggest to Clif, you can do that. That'll be right there. If you like this interview, and subscribe right down below, because a lot of these Tub Talks are just talking about how we're getting through life and ambivalence and uncertainty and the things that give us purpose and the things that are confusing that we're all dealing with right now. So please subscribe to Tub Talks and have more of these conversations. Perhaps you'll have these conversations in your tub or wherever it is you have conversations with your friends. That's what I hope people will do.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye.